My name is Tony Coughlin. I'm with LevaCloud. We're a boutique Microsoft cybersecurity partner and a sponsor on the Navigator program with H. Isaac. Focus on a lot of healthcare, focus strongly in the healthcare space. I am going to kick it over to Dylan from H. Isaac, and he'll pass it back to Gareth. Gareth will begin the webinar, and then we'll end with a Q&A section or session. There is a Q&A button on the top right-hand side of your screen. If you click on that, you'll be able to enter any questions you have as the webinar goes on, and we'll try to spend the last 20 minutes of the webinar getting to those questions. So with that, Dylan, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks, Tony. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. If you don't already know, I'm Dylan Hall. I'm a cyber threat intelligence analyst with Health ISAC, and I'll be introducing today's speaker from LevaCloud and the overall objective of today's webinar. In this webinar, do more with less. We will look at how to protect your healthcare organization from ransomware attacks using Microsoft solutions you may or may not already own by using Zero Trust security model. Our presenters will also discuss the financial data and patient safety implications of improperly securing your organization. Finally, our presenter will provide a roadmap to help healthcare decision makers get started in their journey to build a secure and resilient infrastructure. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. The webinar will be recorded and made available should you wish to revisit today's content. Feel free to post questions in the available Q&A section, like Tony discussed, so that we may address everything at the end of today's presentation. We should have about 10 minutes or so to answer some questions at the end. So with that, I will pass it over to our speaker, Gareth Young.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Dylan. Thank you very much. All right. Let me get this pulled up here. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time today. So this webinar is based off of our recent white paper that we published through H. ISAC. We decided to cover this topic because we're seeing an increase in frequency and impact of ransomware attacks on healthcare organizations. And also, there's an increasing need to safeguard sensitive patient information and maintain operational efficiency. Now, a lot of our customers have made an investment in Microsoft, but they don't necessarily realize the tools that they actually have available to them. This webinar won't focus on the advanced tools included in the E5 licensing suite. We're planning to do another white paper and webinar on those later in the year. So what is ransomware? Ransomware, the official CISA definition, if you will, is a malicious software that encrypts files and systems, right? Typically what happens is victims lose access to their data. It affects the business, it impacts individuals as well. The attackers demand a ransom, typically in cryptocurrencies, for the decryption key. And what's happening these days is some attackers will actually exfiltrate data before they encrypt it and then threaten to sell it or leak it if the ransom's not paid. So that's kind of like a double extortion ransomware attack. Now, CISA advises against paying ransoms and instead focus on the prevention side of things and strong cybersecurity practices instead. So let's talk a little bit about a real world example of a ransomware attack on a healthcare organization. So some of you might remember this one. Back in September of 2020, the Universal Health Services fell victim to a Ryuk ransomware attack, and it affected all 400 of their care sites across the United States. The attack actually caused an EHR outage at all the care sites. It lasted for about 3 weeks, but fortunately the patient care was maintained through kind of like pre-established EHR downtime procedures. Now, the attack resulted in significant financial consequences for them. They lost about 67 million in operating income, labor expenses, recovery costs, all that kind of thing rolled into that. And their actual revenue was negatively impacted as well by about $51.3 million. So, that in itself, and this is just one example of many, highlights the need for healthcare organizations to adopt proactive security measures like zero trust security model that we're going to talk a little bit about today to protect their systems and patient data from future ransomware attacks. So let's kind of double down on this. Why should you be concerned if that previous statistic wasn't concerning enough? So looking at a couple of different reports here, a recent JAMA Health report highlighted a concerning trend that actual cyber attacks against health organizations doubled between 2016 and 2021, exposing the health information of about 42 million patients. So really significant. And then another report, which has healthcare and a blend of other organizations, the 2022 Cyber Threat Defense Report, it emphasized the growing threat of ransomware and account takeover attacks, which out of all of the kind of security professionals and IT leadership surveyed, that kind of account takeover attack and ransomware scenario was one of their top concerns at this point. And it's kind of crazy, like 71% of the surveyed organizations actually experienced a ransomware attack, and 57% of those actually chose to pay the ransom to regain access to their data. The average ransom payment as of Q4 2021 was $322,168. And there's actually like a steady upward trend in the payment amounts that these guys are asking for, these ransomware groups. And really, this just continues to emphasize the significant impact of ransomware on healthcare organizations and the urgency to address these growing threats. So let's talk about Microsoft in this. So, using your existing Microsoft tools and solutions that you already have is essential. A lot of you will have made some level of investment in Microsoft. And, the thing that goes in our favor is a lot of the Microsoft stuff is built to be kind of like streamlined and integrated at some level. And if we're using stuff we already own, it's cost effective, right? Adopting a proactive approach to security, as I like to think of it, by building a strong, secure foundation, first of all, before adding any new additional tools or solutions, it just ensures that, the measures you're putting in place are going to be efficient and effective. And when I look at kind of this building the foundation scenario, cost is not the only reason to take this approach. The analogy I like to use is if you've got a wall, right, and it has weak foundations with cracks in it, sticking some new archers on top of the wall, if you will, is not really going to stop threats from coming through the gaps. Things are going to get missed if we don't have that secure foundation in place that you kind of build proactively first. Now, zero trust security is becoming a little bit of a buzzword, which is unfortunate because this is a real architecture. It's not a product. This is a standardized model that different vendors are implementing their own flavor of. And the reason that this shift in thinking from a traditional, what I would call perimeter security model to a zero trust security model is important is because, in the old world, we'd have all of our services and data and things inside of the network perimeter, and anything inside of that perimeter was considered to be secure. But because of the way that work has evolved, we're in a place where users and devices are signing in from different places. Data applications, they're all hosted in different places. So that kind of concept of the network perimeter has eroded, really. I mean, it doesn't exist anymore, honestly, in my opinion. And we're now in a place where your identities and arguably your devices are the control plane to secure access to different apps and services and data. Now, another thing that's a little bit different with zero trust is that every access request, so every time you sign in, you're not really just authenticating anymore. What we're doing is we're explicitly verifying that you are who you say you are, and you are signing in from a device that we trust, based on what type of device is it? Is it corporate or is it personal? Where are you signing in from? What time of day is it? How do we perceive your risk level to be based on how your account's been behaving within the environment? All of these different factors kind of come into play when it comes to building out the foundations of a zero trust kind of architecture. Now, Microsoft's approach to zero trust adopts a modular approach. So you can implement parts and pieces of this, but maybe you have things from other vendors that you're quite happy with and you like, and that's okay. You can still insert them into different parts of the architecture. It just means you might not get the kind of same level of integration as you would if you were leaning purely on your Microsoft stuff that you've got. Now, looking at the little diagram we've got here, around the outside, we've got these kind of 6 circles: identities, devices, data, apps, infrastructure, and network. And those are what we term the pillars of Microsoft Zero Trust. Now, on the left-hand side, the identities and the devices, those are the foundational pillars of Zero Trust. That's the stuff that you want to get right, first of all, before you really put too much effort into focusing on some of the other areas in here. And then in the center of this, that kind of security policy enforcement piece, that in all reality is a product called Azure AD Conditional Access. It's the heart of Microsoft's Zero Trust architecture, and kind of like the gatekeeper that processes all of those different signals I was talking about from the users and from the devices to evaluate if we trust whoever or whatever is connecting in enough to get access to the resources on the other side. Now, throughout this webinar today, I'm going to be actually structuring the main portion of it around these different pillars to start to show you how you can begin to align yourself with a zero trust methodology using different tools that you likely already own. Before we do anything, what we got to do is understand what your current security posture is, right? We need to make sure that we know where we're at today before we can start making any enhancements to our cybersecurity tools and configurations. And I'm going to share with you a couple of different ways that you can approach that. So this first one here is called the Microsoft Security and Compliance Toolkit. And this is really beneficial to those of you that are mostly managing your workstations with a heavy emphasis on group policy. So what this tool will do is allow us to analyze, and this is the group policy analyzer specifically, it's like part of the whole toolkit. It'll allow us to compare your current group policy to Microsoft best practice security configurations, which are known as security baselines. And the idea with this is you can very easily look to see, what does my current group policy look like? What are the security baselines? And are there areas of vulnerability in here just because we don't know what we don't know? So we can start to kind of address that and harden the configuration on our workstations. And this is something that's quite good to maintain and do on a regular basis, so that throughout the year, as things evolve and change in your environment, you can make sure you're not drifting away from the recommended security baselines. Another tool that you've got in your toolkit, which comes with Microsoft Office 365, Microsoft 365, is called SecureScore. And this is designed to measure your security posture from a kind of cloud Office 365 perspective. This comes with all licensing levels. So if you have any level of Microsoft 365 subscription, you have access to this. And what it does is it provides recommendations for improvement that are organized into 4 distinct groups: identity, device, apps, and data, which, funnily enough, aligns with our zero trust framework we were talking about a moment ago there. And what it'll do is offer targeted suggestions to enhance your security through the improvement actions. And it's actually quite self-service in the sense it even tells you how to go and make the changes. And with the dashboard, it lets you track your progress over time. It'll, as I say, highlight these areas of improvement. And you can even kind of put into say, these are the things I'm planning to do. And it'll show you what that impact would have on your overall score if you were to implement those things. Now, a side note on this, in some organizations, they might have different third-party tools that aren't being factored into the score. You can actually go in here and manually say, I'm doing this thing with a third-party tool, And then it allows you to track everything, including the third-party stuff, and have it accounted for in your secure score. The other cool thing that's in here is it will allow you to compare your score with industry benchmarks. So, the decision makers and security architects in your organization can kind of understand where you should be compared to other organizations like yours. I've also heard of instances from our customers that their insurance vendors have asked to see like a screenshot of this secure score. So this can actually have an impact on your cyber liability insurance premiums away. And honestly, if you kind of build it out like in a positive way. So one other tool that you've got in your arsenal for performing this kind of security posture review is called Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. It's hidden away within the compliance admin portal inside of Microsoft 365. And it kind of advances on some of the stuff that Secure Score does. So it is available for anyone that's really got like F licensing or E licensing. So from the more basic enterprise license and up, you'll have access to this on some level. Out of the box, it comes with a pre-built assessment, because the idea is this is assessing your environment against different compliance standards, regulations, or by default, Microsoft's data protection like baseline, if you will. And this is designed to be an all-up security and compliance management tool. So it's really good to help you kind of understand your overall compliance posture and then guide you on how to improve it. And you can actually use it as a tool to manage the security and compliance posture for other things outside of Microsoft within your organization. You could manually enter things in, state changes that you've made, document evidence of changes that have made in other tools as well as the Microsoft tools. And this is another one that you can kind of then get reports out of and, maybe provide them to different insurance vendors, or just use it as a way to kind of hold yourselves accountable internally for driving forward security and compliance improvements in your programs that you're running. Now, if in the future you decided to upgrade your license into E5, or maybe you already have it, it gives you access to stuff like HIPAA assessments, high tech, all those different types of regulations, and it'll run those against your environment to kind of give you an idea of where you're at compared to those, and what improvement actions you can make that map back to the different control standards in HIPAA, for example. If you're curious to get a peek of that, they actually give you a 90-day trial for free. So it's a good way to kind of kick the tires and actually use it as part of like an assessment process that you might want to do. So moving beyond that, we've had a look at our baseline security posture. We've got an understanding of, some areas that we need to make improvements, and maybe we're working on some of that. Let's now start to generally look at some of the different pillars of Zero Trust and what tools might fall into there that you probably have access to already. Now, this kind of first piece here, when we start talking about identities, really isn't tool driven. There is some process and procedure here. So some best practices from me on where to start when we look at identities. Straight away, let's adopt a least privilege approach for admins to ensure that they've only got the minimum level of access that they need to actually perform their job functions. Doing that will limit any damage that could occur if an admin account was compromised, and it reduces the attack surface, right, for cyber criminals, because if you've got less admins, there's less accounts to go wrong. And then, if an account was compromised, it's going to reduce the blast radius too by just giving them the sort of least privilege that they need. I do still see a lot of organizations where I go in and everyone's got like a global administrator, right, keys to the kingdom sort of thing. Beyond that, in some cases, it might even make sense to have separate accounts for administrative tasks versus, what you're using for your everyday activities. And again, this is another way to reduce the risk of exposing admin privileges, which could give access to sensitive data or systems. The kind of third thing that I would call more procedural is regularly auditing user accounts to look for any inactive or dormant accounts that actually have admin privileges. Because in this kind of scenario, if a dormant account with admin privileges was compromised, you might not actually notice, honestly. And again, we do assessments in different environments and have found a lot of cases where there's just kind of dormant accounts sitting there with domain admin and stuff like that, and nobody realized, right? And this is stuff you can audit yourself with, even with like scripts and things. So it's definitely something you can insource. And then the last one on this part of identities, at least, if you've got Microsoft 365, really of any level, it has a capability built into Azure AD already called Azure AD Password Protection. And what that's doing is, if you're resetting your passwords up in the cloud, then it stops your users from picking things that are weak or easily guessable, or have been leaked out to the dark web. Microsoft maintains like a list of bad passwords. So with that E3 licensing level, you actually get access to Azure AD Password Protection for on-premise. So a little server or set of servers that you can deploy, and it extends that protection down to local password resets on-prem. And not a lot of people realize that exists. So this next one might not be a surprise to anyone, but multi-factor authentication is high up on my list of things that I recommend implementing. I still work in a few different environments where we haven't quite got there for all of the users for different reasons, and this is like the lowest hanging fruit to protecting yourself from a threat. In the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, it's free. It's there at every licensing level. You do get different bells and whistles as you move up the licensing, but we can take advantage of it at all levels. The Microsoft Authenticator app is kind of like the easiest way to do it. Most people have a phone, they install the app, and they can get push notifications. They've just added number matching, or rolling time-based codes to help verify identity. Now, Azure AD does support other MFA methods. If you've got an E3, I think all of these are in there. And you can kind of see the different options on the screen here. I would highly recommend staying away from SMS. There are a lot of what I would call SIM swapping attacks and smishing attacks going on these days. I had a customer not that long ago where one of their executives was at the other end of a SIM swapping attack. So what that means is a threat actor phoned up their cell provider, pretended to be them, and got their phone number swapped off to another phone, and then was able to use that to reset their password and kind of like get through because of the MFA situation there. So that's something to watch out for. Looking forward to like where Microsoft's going from an identity standpoint is passwordless authentication, and other vendors are jumping on this as well. So really the idea with passwordless authentication is to reduce the risk of password related attacks by just not having our users type their password in every time they need to do something, right? Using different passwordless mechanisms to honestly provide a more streamlined kind of login experience and a better user experience. There's a few different mechanisms in the Microsoft ecosystem that you will all have access to. So I mentioned the number matching feature inside of Authenticator, and that's kind of turned on by default now, actually. You can see that in the middle, what it looks like. FIDO2 keys for environments where you maybe can't have a phone, for example. I've got one customer that has a secure area where they're not allowed to bring phones in. So, they're taking advantage of FIDO security keys. They work straight up with Azure AD. And Windows Hello for Business as well. A lot of devices now are coming pre-equipped with the appropriate cameras and fingerprint scanners to do the biometric sign-in. And also, even if they don't, Windows will support like having a PIN as an alternative to the password. And that's not just replacing a password with a PIN. Like, there is a hardware component to that as well inside of the laptops. So if someone was to like rip the drive out, they can't just type the PIN in on another device. So there is, some multi-factor security in there too. One of the most kind of powerful things, I touched on this in the beginning, when it comes to the identity side of things, is conditional access. I could spend a whole hour talking about this in itself, But real quick, just to kind of drive the point home on this one, it's at the center of Microsoft's Zero Trust architecture. It's the gatekeeper. It will allow you to take in all of those different signals that we see on the left-hand side to validate if we trust the connection enough to let it through. And, we might want to allow access, we might want to block access or limit access, right? Depending on the use case. The cool thing with this is not just for Microsoft stuff. If you're an organization with ADFS or some other single sign-on capability, like Azure AD can replace that, and you're likely licensed for it, and it's just a lot easier to manage than some legacy kind of single sign-on services like ADFS, and it gives you a lot more granularity in what you can do from a security perspective, allowing users or devices to sign in from different locations, different device types, different organizations. So let's now move into endpoints. Endpoint security is crucial in protecting against malware, ransomware, a whole host of cyber threats. Devices are increasingly being attacked by our threat actors due to the vulnerabilities that honestly are appearing on them every day. Now, this is about kind of proactive security, what I'm going to talk about here. So attack surface reduction rules are kind of like pre-canned hardening rules that you can apply to all of your Windows devices to mitigate a whole host of different things. They stop things like Microsoft Office from being able to launch what I would call child processes, like spin out its own applications. And, there's a lot of different things that these rules will do. The reason they're really important is because the threat landscape's evolving so much, we do get things called zero-day attacks where there isn't any way to defend against it, right? There's no patch we can apply. And, other types of malware that can get around some of our endpoint protection capabilities. So with these attack surface reduction rules, you can turn them on as a type of proactive security to defend against those kind of unknown attacks. You can do that with group policy, or if you've got like an E3 type license or an F3 type license, you can actually do it through Microsoft Intune, which used to be called Endpoint Manager until recently. And it's the kind of second one on my list here. So for those of you that aren't using Intune today and are still maybe doing, legacy imaging where an IT user touches the device manually, maybe it's imaged over the network or the USB stick or something like that. Intune completely revolutionizes that. We're able to do zero-touch deployments with devices where you can just hand them straight to the user and it configures itself as soon as it's turned on. I touched on security baselines in the beginning. They're already there in Intune. You just have to turn them on. There's not a lot of configuration involved. You don't have to trawl through group policy and try and compare things. A lot of the kind of hardening and security settings are just in there and ready to go. And you can also centralize the management of some of the things we're actually going to talk about on the next slide using Intune. So just looking at kind of native Windows capability that's often overlooked. In fact, the last call I was on, they told me that they turn all the firewalls off on their workstations and instead just rely on the firewall on the edge of the network. And that's, was quite a sizable organization where I shared my sort of thoughts around not doing that. So Windows Defender Firewall, you have the ability to centrally manage it with both group policy and Intune. And really, in this scenario, it's just about kind of having that base level of security in place and making sure it's consistent across all of your devices. If you need to put different exceptions in there for different applications, you can. Don't just rely on what's on the edge of your network, especially if the user takes the device home sometimes, right? Defender Smart Screen. This is another one that's kind of built into Windows and Microsoft Edge. The idea with that is it looks at the different websites you're accessing and it'll try and like safeguard users from downloading malicious software or accessing like non-malicious websites. And it'll warn them if they like try and do that. That's native in Windows. You just have to make sure it's turned on, again, by group policy or Intune. And then Defender Antivirus itself. So, you know, a lot of people probably do have an advanced endpoint protection capability. I do have some large customers that are kind of leaning on the Defender Antivirus. And, you know, yes, you can kind of manage it centrally with group policy, but you don't get a lot of visibility there. If you do it with Intune, it'll actually read out to you, you know, the state of the devices. And now included in the E3 license, you've got Defender for Endpoint P1, which kind of adds a bit of capability over and above what the out-of-the-box Windows antivirus gives you. So, you know, it's a step up from having unmanaged antiviruses and things like that. That's why I wanted to kind of call that out. Now, this feature here actually was kind of the thing that spawned this whole webinar for me. This is built into Windows. It's there out of the box. You just, again, have to enable it. Controlled folder access. So this is a feature that's designed to basically safeguard files and folders from unauthorized changes by malware and other malicious software, right? To ensure the integrity of, you know, confidential and sensitive data on the devices. And you can actually specify which folders, which files should only be allowed to be changed by, you know, trusted applications. This can really significantly reduce the risk when it comes to ransomware attacks. And this one you can deploy again either with group policy or through Intune, but you know, you might find it's off in some of your organizations. This is a good one to look out for. Moving into applications now, working our way around the zero trust model here. So securing email and applications is vital as part of your comprehensive security strategy. You know, they often serve as entry points for cyber attacks. They can be exploited to gain unauthorized access to sensitive data. So going back to Defender Antivirus again, it actually plays a significant role in scanning email files and embedded objects for potential threats. And this is something that you can kind of tune to get it to do through both group policy or Intune, just to make sure, you know, we've got that set consistently across all of our devices if Defender's our antivirus of choice. Outside of that, Exchange Online Protection. So this one actually comes out of the box with Microsoft 365. And, you know, even if you are using a third-party sort of capability today to protect your email, you know, maybe it's not doing the full stack of advanced email protections. So if that's the case, have a little look at this. So with Exchange Online Protection, it does actually let you do a level of configuration to enhance like the spam filtering settings and the spoof checks and all that kind of thing. So you can get in there and customize that. And honestly, the last thing I'd shout out actually that a lot of people don't realize, you know, if you have that E3 level licensing, you also have email encryption. So your users can send encrypted emails just directly from Outlook. They get a button in there to do that, or you can create some rules on the back end to kind of automate some of that. So looking again at security baselines, outside of the endpoint ones for Windows, there are also security baselines for Microsoft Office, the Office apps, and also Microsoft Edge. So with the Office apps, again, Microsoft's recommended hardening settings for all of those applications. At the moment, you can only apply those with group policy, but in the future, actually, I think in the next couple of months, they'll be adding that to Intune as well. And then the Microsoft Edge security baseline. So that one's already in Intune. You can do it through group policy too. And this just allows you to kind of set things like, you know, what extensions are we going to allow people to install on their Edge browser and that kind of thing, to make sure that you know, folks are staying safe out there if they're trying to mess around with different extensions and that kind of thing. Okay, so moving into the data pillar here, you know, if you've got your 365 licensing, you already have some really powerful tools that can be one up from SMB file shares. So I have a lot of customers that have really large amounts of data sitting on premise inside of SMB file shares. It's all kind of unclassified. They don't really know what's in it. So, you know, a lot of times we'll help them do some discovery into that to get an understanding of what the compliance risk might be. And if there is sensitive data in there that could be at risk, if there was a breach, then we want to make sure we're wrapping appropriate controls around that. Now, when we talk about this kind of network perimeter eroding, maybe users are copying stuff down from file shares. It could get leaked by accident. They could send it to the wrong person. Like, there's a lot of stuff that can happen there. Just by leaning in on some of these modern capabilities that are within the Microsoft ecosystem that you've got, if you've got E3, you can add a lot of protection. So, like, first off, generally using OneDrive Online and SharePoint, I mean, it's got version history, the ability to restore previous versions of files or entire folders if something happens to them. You've got purview data loss prevention. You can create policies for Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive that can either monitor sensitive data being shared externally, it can take actions and block it, or you can even kind of configure it so that, maybe we're okay with certain information types being shared externally. We just want to make sure they're encrypted inline as they're going out the door. So, DLP, huge thing to turn on within your Microsoft 365 ecosystem if you've not already. It's really deeply integrated into the tools because it is part of the tools. I've had scenarios where we've done discovery and turned DLP on in like a monitor only mode, and it's identified users that are maybe not malicious, but probably shouldn't be doing it. I've been forwarding their entire mailbox out to a personal email address just to kind of make it easier to access it because, the organization didn't have a proper kind of like BYOD policy. So yeah, well worth looking at. And then Microsoft Purview information protection. So part of that E3 licensing level again, this one can be a bit of a step up in maturity for organizations if they've not done it before. So what it provides you with is the ability to label your files and documents with the sensitivity level. And at the E3 level, that is kind of like a manual thing. But the cool thing with it is it gives you the ability to mark something, for example, as highly confidential and have it encrypt the file at the file level. And at that point, going back to our zero trust approach, if something happened and that file ended up in the wrong place, it got past DLP or whatever, then it's still protected because the service has encrypted it at the file level and it can only be opened by the person that was intended to open it in the first place. So that again is another really powerful tool that's in your toolkit there. So, with that said, to kind of bring it round and bring it home, ransomware attacks are increasing. There's definitely a need to be really proactive and build out your security program with a strong foundation to help protect against them. I believe that using a combination of these tools throughout your overall security strategy will reduce the risk overall from an organization, being open to a ransomware attack. It's one of those things where it's not just putting in this individual point solution that's specific for ransomware. It's reducing risk across the board, so we're reducing the number of avenues that a ransomware attack could kind of come in from. And a lot of these tools you have in your tool belt already, like I said. And yeah, strongly recommend maximize the investments you've already made before you layer in additional security tools and capabilities. So with that said, I'm going to just kind of pass over to Tony now, just to talk a little bit about this slide.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We hope you found this webinar insightful. We are thrilled to offer you guys the chance to delve deeper into the Microsoft 365 and its capabilities with these specialized workshops. The best part about them is they're entirely free, thanks to the Microsoft MCI program. The workshops are designed to equip you with the knowledge and skills you need to make informed decisions and boost your organization's productivity and cybersecurity. We will cover topics like modern work, zero trust security, endpoint management, and user identity protection. Plus, we can show you how to use the Microsoft 365 tools to enhance collaboration and productivity within your team. The workshops are tailored to your organization's unique needs and environments. So you'll receive customized recommendations and actionable steps to help you make the most out of your investment with Microsoft. You don't have to worry about the cost. The entire workshop is covered by Microsoft funding, so you won't have to divert any resources from other important programs to participate. After this call, we will follow up with each of you to share the slides and the recording link. If you're ready to kind of get that answer to the we don't know what we don't know question as it pertains to Microsoft licensing and what's included, please let us know. We have helped other health ISAC members take advantage of this program and look forward to helping the rest of the community. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to hearing back from you. I'll throw it back to Gareth now to close out.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that, Tony. So yeah, at this point, we'd love to kind of open the floor to any questions that you might have about the topics we've covered or any of that kind of workshop information that Tony was sharing there. And so yeah, we'll just kind of pause here for a few minutes while folks put some feedback into the Q&A box. You'll find it just at the sort of top right of your Teams window there. And we've got a question here from Dan already asking about 90 days for the restoration of files. Let me see if I can chat in here. Because I'd say it kind of depends on your licensing level as to how far you can get. And someone's raised their hand as well, Tony. Tim, see if you can pop your message into the Q&A box there. If not, we'll maybe try and unmute.
Yeah, let's see if I can give Tim the floor here. Give me a second. Tim, I just allowed your mic. You'll have to hit unmute and mute, or mute and then unmute again to speak. Otherwise, pop it in the question box. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, so my name is Tim. This is a very, very interesting topic. I mean, it's a topic that I really needed in time because, I mean, just last week, I've been trying to gain an understanding of how the preview compliance managers work because we're using the CIS control, and it's a bit, I mean, somehow confusing to me, and I'm still trying to study it. Is there a way one can cover this topic on how to use the preview compliance manager while trying to gain an understanding of the CIS control?
So Tim, just to replay that, you're interested to learn a little bit more about the CIS assessments within Compliance Manager.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the Compliance Manager side of things, what licensing level do you guys have?
In actual fact, actually don't. I know I was trying to go deeper, and it was like I need to upgrade, you know. So probably we don't have the full license to gain access to that.
Well, like I say, it should let you turn on a 90-day trial, and it'll either let you do that directly inside of Compliance Manager, or if you go into the Office 365 Admin Center and have a search underneath like the marketplace where you can kind of like add products and licenses, you'll be able to find a trial there as well. And then, yeah, you know, that'll kind of let you add it. Really the way it works is you pick it from the premium assessment templates sort of tab. And yeah, they let you have 3, I think, or maybe a couple more than that as part of the trial. So you could try CIS, you could try HIPAA, you know, whatever fits the use case. And literally what it'll do is it'll run against the environment. There's some stuff inside of them that will like assess automatically, but sometimes you have to go into the settings inside of Compliance Manager to make it do that. And it'll show you pretty quickly like what's misconfigured, what's not configured. You might find the score a bit on the lower end though. Like I say, if you've got third-party products that are maybe filling some of the capabilities that the Microsoft stuff would, and it would just be the case of sort of going through the list and, you know, noting that in there for the different ones. Because you can go in and literally type in, you know, here's what we did to implement this. This is how we tested it. Here's the evidence, that kind of thing. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's helpful though. You know, I'll try get in there, play around with it, and see the kind of license we get, and from there, I mean, we take it on from there. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay. And I see Dan's just responded back here on the licensing side of things. So, Dan, I think you're maybe asking about the deleted items on the SharePoint side of things. Maybe just trying to think with that 90-day, 1 year thing. So maybe something to look at outside of like just the SharePoint Admin Center, if you're on Microsoft 365 E3, is the actual retention policies that you can set in the Compliance Center, because you can hold stuff for a lot longer with that, actually, probably several years. That would be where I would kind of recommend having a look on the compliance side of the house. So I think, did we get some other hands raised there as well? Just looking through.
Hey, Gareth, I got a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
So what kind of techniques can be used to ensure privileged accounts are secure?
Yeah, great question. So a few different things to kind of tackle this one. Limiting the number of privileged accounts in the first place. You know, the less people that have those privileges, the more it kind of reduces the attack surface there. And I know I touched on a couple of these things in the webinar. So applying the principle of least privilege as well. You know, we only want to give folks the permissions they need really to, you know, do what they need to do and no more than that. Other stuff though, like actually monitoring privileged accounts so that we can identify any kind of suspicious behaviors and take appropriate actions against them, whether it's resetting passwords or that kind of thing. Your password policies themselves, you know, make sure they are complex. Let's pair MFA with them, even more so for those privileged accounts. I would say as well, if the privileged account is actually a service account, then deny interactive logon for it so people aren't signing in with something that shouldn't be signed in with. I actually ran into that with a customer recently. And it caused a lot of confusion during our security assessment and a bit of investigation. So yeah, those are probably the top things I would say on that one.
Okay, awesome. I got another one here for you. So what are some best practices for monitoring activity in Azure resources?
Yeah, that's a good one, actually, because we never really touched on Azure through this. So I would say, you know, if you're just starting out in Azure, or, you know, if you've got some workloads in there already, I would take a look at Microsoft Defender for Cloud. It's just in there. It's actually got a free tier that includes cloud security posture management. So what that'll do is it'll give you recommendations on how you should configure your workloads and resources to make sure they're secure. You know, it'll kind of scan across and look at what's there, and a little bit like Secure Score, give you different security recommendations. And the cool thing with that as well is you can actually connect it to AWS and Google Cloud as well, and it'll provide the same capabilities for workloads in those clouds too. So that's probably the direction I'd go. It's got a paid tier as well, and the paid tier like provides threat protection for your different sort of multi-cloud workloads, whether it's VMs or web servers or app services or whatever. So yeah, good question.
Awesome. I'll ask one more and give, I guess, everybody else a chance to input their questions there still. But what are the benefits of using Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager?
Yeah, no, that's a great one too. So I would say just being able to centralize the management of your overall security and compliance posture is one of the huge things there. You know, it's a great way to like drive an initiative within your organization to really get things configured in line with either the data protection baseline or other things like HIPAA or high tech. You know, and like I mentioned early on, you might find that like by actually showing that to your insurance vendor. It could drive down the cost of your cyber liability insurance premiums. But I know a lot of organizations that just kind of do this manually and don't really have a centralized place to track it. And the fact that it's just kind of in there, I think, is a huge benefit in itself to, help drive and hold accountable on that stuff.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. I'd like to thank our speakers, Gareth and Tony, for their insight in Assure. And as I mentioned before, the recording will be available at Lava Cloud. And I believe you can use the same link. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And what we'll do is we'll put it up on our YouTube. It's probably the easiest way, and then we'll share the link with everyone along with the slides.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys, and thanks for putting on a great show, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.